Welcome to another edition of Very Vogue with me, Val Kleinhans. I have a very special guest in the building today. Her name is Kaylie O Connor. Kaylie is a travel vlogger and fellow mid-sized baddie from Minnesota. Kaylie, you are here because you are very Vogue. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Me too. Right now, you're in the middle of traveling. You're coming to me from Amsterdam. So, where
Yes.
have you been so far? What's it been like?
Okay, well, I've really only been to Amsterdam so far. So I've been within the United States and I've done a little bit of traveling and I will have the announcement video hopefully out by the end of this week. But I took a big leap recently and I quit my job at the end of April and I decided I'm just gonna go for travel the whole 9 yards, and I'll still stick with fashion too because that's something I love, something I've created a community around. So both of
Yeah.
those things will kind of be my focus.
Okay, so this means content creation full time? Or
Yes.
yes, all right. I can't wait
Yes.
to see it. That's the dream. That's the dream. That's what I'm striving to do too. So that's awesome.
Yes.
What is the best part about traveling for you?
So far it's a constant push out of complacency. I think
Mm,
something I see, especially in the Midwest in Minnesota, is people who just kind of get complacent with their life.
right.
Or they follow what they think like the timeline of life should be. And I'm not saying I don't, fall into that at all because I definitely do. There's definitely times in my life where as a 27-year-old, I'm like, I think I should be here by now. But in general, I mean, I don't want to live a life that's just kind of the same. I've always wanted a life that's bolder and stands out and is memorable. I want to be that old person with a lot of stories. And
Mhm.
so sometimes the only way to do that is to go out of your comfort zone and do something different. And yeah, Amsterdam has pushed me out of my comfort zone a lot. I had a friend come with me for the first couple of days, but then I would say the last 4 days I've been by myself. And that has been new, navigating the transportation. The language is a little different. Some words are the same, but it's a constant push out of the comfort zone, um, and a balance too. I think that's part of it as well, of like
Yeah.
sometimes giving yourself a break and just having a relaxing day so you don't have all this newness all the time.
Yeah, because that's a lot at once.
Yes. Well, so I went to Dallas and I'm going to do a little self promo real quick. I just put out my vlog for my Dallas trip, and while I was there, it was me and 8 other young adults and we just went for a couple of different reasons, but I ended up putting in my 2 weeks while I was there. And so I really went from um going on this 16-hour car ride, putting in my 2 weeks notice, being in Texas, coming home, a week later, I'm done with my job. I'm in Amsterdam. And then I'm going to come home, do an internship, and go back to traveling full time internationally in the fall. But I'll do national travel in the summer to create content and to build up that community.
Wow. Oh man.
It's
Okay,
a
so
lot.
but it's a huge leap. Most people would be afraid to even take that first step. What was the motivation for you to say I'm gonna do this?
Yeah, normally I also wouldn't take that leap, but I got transferred. I was at the same company for 5 years
Mm.
and I got transferred like 8 or 9 months ago to a new team. It just wasn't meshing very well. And it just got to a point
I
where
hate
I'm
when that
not someone
happens.
who's ever, yes, I've never struggled like with mental health, like to an extreme degree. And it was just getting to that point where I rather not like make income. It was kind of that decision. Like, would I rather not make income and be mentally okay? Or would I rather be mentally unwell and still have income coming in? And so that's what ultimately had me make the jump.
Yeah, more and more of us are being faced with that decision because we are seeing
Mhm.
that trend, at least in corporate America anyway, or it's like
Yes.
this is a life and a time suck. Like it really is.
Yes.
Just to, to be doing this job and then to deal with the stressors that inevitably come with it. And on top of that, when you're, around people that you don't really want to be around all
Yeah.
day, spending most of your time with, people that you don't even like. I mean,
Yes.
it gets exhausting. It does take a toll on your mental health, which then transfers to physical health. I had to make that same decision, and I'm better off for it. I changed industries
That's what
because
I was just gonna ask. Are
yeah.
you in person or are you work from home?
No, I'm on site. So I actually just wrapped up my shift now, and
Okay.
I just booked a conference room and I was like, "Hey." But so
Well, thanks for making it work.
yeah,
I appreciate it.
that's the key thing. I mean, and you probably learned this too with not just content creation, but anything you want to do in life. The more
Mhm.
flexible that you can be, the more likely it is to actually happen. Like
Yes.
when it comes to schedules, when it comes to expectations, the more flexible you can be, the more likely it is to actually get that first step out there and, and make it happen. So many of us forget that. That's why
Yes.
it blew me away. Honestly, when I first moved to Minnesota, I met so many people that were like how you're describing. They've lived in that same town that they've always been. They've been on the dairy farms until they were like 20 and
The
21.
dairy
And then
farms.
they're on the dairy farm until they're like 20 and 21. And then they go work at Mayo Clinic for 30 and 40 years and they
Yes.
stay and they can
Yes.
stay. Like I have coworkers where that is their exact scenario. And it blew my mind coming from Pittsburgh because I'm like, how the hell do you stay at one job that long? Like you
Yeah.
can because every other experience that I'd had until then, even watching my parents, growing up with the steel industry, that changed as I was a kid, and
Okay.
there were layoffs there. And for me I had my own experiences where I was changing jobs in my working life so far. I was like, that is actually like an accomplishment to say you've been somewhere 30, 40 years. Like I would want that stability. And that's
Yeah.
where I sat back and said, this person isn't really like know how to talk to patients in particular ways or doesn't understand like cultures in other parts of the country. And you could just
Yeah.
tell. And you can tell it's because they
Yes.
never left that area. And
Yes.
and they didn't learn. They don't they're sitting here coming from Minnesota. They've never had an interaction with somebody from the South before. And
Hmm.
they don't understand that like small talk and little things like that mean something to somebody from that part of the country. Or it just little things like that that I've noticed. And it boggles my mind that they could stay like just in one area that long and be completely content with it. You're the kind of person that wasn't content with it and you did something about it.
No, yes. So actually that's a great point to go off of too. My mom is from an area in Iowa and Illinois. It's called the Quad Cities.
Oh, I know
And
the up.
my
I lived in Ottawa. I lived in Ottawa for three
Oh,
and a
did
half
you?
years. And
Okay, I didn't know that.
Davenport was 2 hours away. So yes, I know
Yep.
exactly where you are.
Yes. My mom's family has been there for 4 generations.
Oh
And
God, I believe it.
she was like the first one to really leave and not like return within a couple of years. I mean, she's been in Minnesota now with my dad for 30, I don't know, 35 years, something like that. And so I think that's something that's interesting too is when I go to create content, especially for travel, it's yes, is exciting and it's this new fun, I don't know, adventure. I don't really love that word because I think it's overused, but it's this new exciting piece of content and people will love it. And she went to Hawaii and she went to Texas, right? Like she went to Amsterdam. But at the same time, I'm trying to make it relatable to people
Mm,
like my family who have never left the Quad Cities and also do it in a way where like they are content with their life and I respect that, but sometimes it's hard for me to understand because I want to get up and go do something different. But when I go to create that content, I'm trying to think of people like my family in the Quad Cities who
right.
love that they have this multi-generational rooted system, where the people who do work the corporate job for 50 years. And I mean, we
Yeah.
could even go into that too. Like corporate has changed in my understanding so much. My dad is older. My dad's in the baby boomer generation. And so just the way that he talks about like the workforce back
Mhm.
50 years ago versus now, it's very different. Or even my
Yes.
siblings, my half siblings are older than me. They're closer, they're like in between my mom's age and my age. And so even the way that they talk about like a corporate layout and a job, and you work and you gain that trust and that loyalty. And to me, I'm in this like older Gen Z, young millennial generation, and I'm watching Gen Z just like tear apart the workforce.
Yeah,
And I
and
have
we're
like a
going,
little
"Yes."
rebellion.
I know.
Yes.
We're going, "Yes, honey, we will back you up." I'm
Yes.
33. Like, so I feel you on that. I'm 33, so I'm kind of
Yes.
like somewhere on the younger end of millennial-ish, I guess you could
Yes,
say.
I feel like you also have that young vibe. Like
Y
you don't like back in the day I used to be like 30 so old, and now I'm 27 and I'm like I got to stop saying that
Yeah,
because
I
like it doesn't
know.
have to be.
Our age, I know we have our perception of age changes as we get older too. I'm
Yes.
seeing that because it used to be if I heard somebody was like 60 or 70, I was like, "Oh, they're old, they're elderly." And now I'm like, "Those are my parents." You know,
Yes.
like that's not like, and to me, that's not old because they're your superhero. They're like
Yes.
superhuman. They can take on anything and they can do no wrong. And how dare I say somebody their age is elderly because we don't put that into that same context. So it's not really fair. You're only as old as you feel. I mean, I've heard
That's
that.
so true.
Yeah, I've heard that thousands of times. And I'm like, that's it. Because 33 doesn't feel different than 31 or 32 or even
Yeah.
30. Feels a little bit different from 25, but not physically.
Well,
But
I mean, that's good to know because 25 was a rough year. So I don't
yeah,
want to go back there.
no, yeah, 25 we were doing the most. 25 was when I was in the middle of you're doing the most and you're headed toward antidepressants and a
Yeah.
continuous script for those. That's that was 25. We were working so hard. We were working
Yes.
so hard thinking that this is what we had to do because we had boomer parents saying this is the roadmap, which wasn't
Yes.
necessarily wrong. And it instilled, a solid work ethic and it instilled the understanding that if we want that independence, we got to go get it. Nobody's going to do it for us. But I feel like we traded self respect for that. I feel like we
Yeah.
traded boundaries and being setting those in an appropriate way. I feel like we traded all of that for to follow that path. And now I love that
Yes.
Gen Z is coming and saying, not today. We're gonna like make them come our way a little bit. And it's like, okay,
Yes.
once all this is done between the generations, I think we're gonna find a nice balance once we're done duking it
I
out.
would agree. Well, and I think that's really, I mean, in a lot of arenas, it's like when you get to the two extremes, then you're able to see, okay, these are my two boundaries. So what's my middle? And I think also one thing that I've seen in myself, but also in culture is I remember getting out of college. I graduated college 5 years ago. And I remember getting out and I had friends, some of them were pursuing careers and others were pursuing family. And I remember my friends who were pursuing family, I just thought like they're so traditional and that sounds so boring
Yeah.
to me at that time.
Yeah.
But now, and part of this too is like getting into older 20s and things change, your thoughts change. But I think part of it too was we have this idea of like women's rights and feminism, but it almost that too also went to an extreme where it's like if you want to do the traditional route, you're almost holding us back. And I'm excited to see us kind of heading back towards the center of that, where it just
Right.
gets back to like women deciding if they want to work or raise a family, if they want to give everything to a career, whatever they want to do. So I think it's a little bit of like a change in generational thought, a change in the way corporate works, a change in like feminism and women's thoughts and kind of their goals. It's
Yeah.
very interesting. Yeah, the last 5 years. And I also would say since 2020, we've seen a lot of change there too.
Yeah, our thoughts about work and how much time, figuratively and literally, that we invest in it, yeah, that's totally
Hmm.
changed. I wanted to ask you,
Yes.
since we're talking a little bit about women and how we view women, do you ever
Mm.
get crap for being a woman that travels alone? Because I would imagine that maybe sometimes you do by people who have a different narrative in their head.
Not yet. I assume that will come eventually, but so my travels so far on a public kind of stage have been with other people. I
Okay.
did when I decided I wanted to do this, I talked to my friend Lauren, and she also has a podcast called Low on the Go. Super great reference point if someone who's watching this wants to start traveling, or even if you want to start traveling. I sat on the phone with Lauren for 2 hours and I said, I think I'm going to quit my job. And she was very excited for me. And I said, I need to know everything about solo female travel, because not only is there a sense of safety that's necessary, but then there's just things like in traveling that I had no clue what to do. And that also was the benefit of having my friend Ani come with me at the beginning of the
Mm,
trip, because there were so many things where she was like, well, transportation is different. Like, what do you think? How are you going to navigate the city? Or even apps to
mhm.
use, things like that. So I had these women kind of behind me preparing me so that when I get to this point now, I can jump as successfully as I can solo into this.
Okay, so the things that you were kind of surprised by, we'll say, for lack of a better word, they had nothing
Mhm.
really to do with gender, just the typical travel stuff of this is how to navigate this city versus another one, or this is how people get around in this city versus another one. Is that fair to
Yes.
say? Okay.
Now, I will say that Amsterdam is a great place to start for women. One, the language, not that different. Two, I just feel like men treat us better here. Like I don't feel scared.
Yeah.
Like I don't feel I have I'm in the hostel right now, actually. So like there's a bunk bed above me and I'm in the lower
Hmm.
bunk, and then there's like a queen sized bed over here, like two beds put together. But there's two guys who are in the room with me, not right now, but like they are rooming here. And they're two like 18-year-old boys from Britain, and they're just so nice. I don't know. I don't know how to describe it. I'm not someone who walks around in the United States and is like, everyone's out to get me. Like, I don't feel that. But there is something different about being in a society where, in one sense, like women aren't viewed as property or as a product, or,
Hmm.
that is here. We have the red light district in Amsterdam. But in a general sense, when I'm going on transportation, I haven't been catcalled. I haven't been like disrespected in that sense. I haven't
Okay.
felt unsafe. So that's all really different, from the United States. If I go into a major city and I try to do some sort of transportation, there's just a different feeling. And so I think it would differ too if like when I went to India in 2017, I went for 2 weeks for a school trip in college. And I was glad that I was with a group. I don't think anything would have necessarily happened, but it's just a totally different culture. And
Yeah, you
Lauren,
hear
who I
about it.
mentioned, I'm sorry.
You hear about it, the things that have happened to
Yes.
Indian women. I mean,
Yes.
it would make me a little nervous. I'll just being completely real, but you were with the group.
Yeah, so I liked being with a group. I will also, I mean, I think part of being a white woman is understanding privilege to a degree. So there is a different privilege being a white woman when you go to India.
Oh,
And but Lauren also she lives in India right now. And so she and I were talking about, just you will go out to a marketplace or something and women stay home a lot of the times. And so a lot of the men are going out in public. So to see a woman in public, and also the understanding of the culture is like you can be stared at, and it's very intense, and it's very different than anything I'd ever experienced. Now, the country has rich history and a great culture. I don't want to down talk India. It's not all that, but there's differences in cultures between men and women a lot.
hmm. Those are things to learn. I mean, we wouldn't have known that
Yes.
if you would probably maybe would not have known that if you didn't go to India and see
Yeah.
it yourself. Is that part of why it's so important to you to post about your travels? Are you trying to bring the world to us, so to speak, so that people can learn?
Yes. Yes, because again, there's the trying to make it relatable to people who don't have the same itch for travel that I do. But then it's also an education for everyone who's watching, whether they want to be a solo female traveler or or they have no plans to go to a trip, but they want to understand other cultures and other parts of the world. Maybe they have friends that have, come from those parts of the world and they want to understand them better. I feel like a huge thing that's lacking in social media right now is education.
Mm,
And a lot of it is just like we're consuming and we're doing trends and we're trying to gain a following. But I think a community is really built off of commonality and interests and also being educated. Like that's the type of people that I'm following right now. Someone who I think has been a great resource to me for like social media and branding is my friend Marcus Stiles. He's really big in the local fashion community in Minnesota. And he was talking with me about how building a community is different than building a following. And I think that's so
mm.
key because you want to like it's a loyalty and it's a group together and you're giving information, you're getting information back, you're kind of creating these connections. It's different
Okay.
for sure.
There is a huge difference between loyalty and a community and just a following.
Yes.
That's for when you're looking at how to build that and build that brand. I mean, I think some of the most successful people in the world have built what I call a community versus just have a following because they invested that time with their fans, and that love and that sense of loyalty is reciprocated between the two. It's not
Yes.
one-sided. So I absolutely
Yes.
agree. I think that is totally important. Something I wanted to ask, just because I'm curious, it's a great point and it's smart, making travel relatable to the everyday American. How do you do it?
Let me think on that for a second. I i feel like a big part of it is making it more digestible because people are already, as I said, intaking so much information every single
Mm,
day. So, what I'm trying to do going forward, yes, I'll have my long form vlogs on YouTube, but then also maybe doing for my podcast, like a little topic here and there about travel, making it more of a digestible
mm,
one topic situation. Or, um, for example, on Instagram, I'm starting to do Saturday sips, and so while I'm here in Amsterdam, I'm going to talk about like espresso bars I've gone to that I really like or cafes I really love. So that's an easy way to make travel digestible and small and, understandable. And it's not too long form. People don't get bored by it. They can save it. And then if they go save it to their Amsterdam, folder, then later when they go, oh, she really liked this place. I want to try that when I go there. And it's kind of using the same type of content and adapting it to long form and short form for different types of audiences.
yeah, and you're already choosing, cafes or things that we've seen here in the
Hmm.
States that aren't so exotic or so foreign to us that we're like, what even is this? Like you're you're
Yes.
breaking it down in a way where it's like, okay, that's at least recognizable. And I do want to learn more about that because that's somewhat familiar to me. And I already have some level of interest there. I did just find out that you're a podcaster. I was reading that earlier. Tell me about your show.
Yes, I have one season in. It's called the Gratis Group Chat. And it's hard to describe because it is just a topical, whatever I'm feeling for the week. I
Mm,
did 10 episodes and I finished that up right before I went to Texas. And I just felt like I want to take some time to really decide what I want to do for season two. I didn't know if I wanted to go more travel, for that route and interview people who have inspired me in the travel world. I don't know if I want to keep doing all of season one was monologues. So it's just me talking about a topic that I, either researched on or I was passionate about. And so I'm just kind of trying to decide. And I think that's the joy. I want to say this too of creating content is we're so focused on niche right now.
mm,
And one thing that my friend Amber, she does Salt Light Social, she talked about how the niche doesn't have to be interests. It's about like morals and values. So if
Oh.
my morals and values, obviously I have a religious sense with like Christianity, but I also have a moral and a value on fashion and having sustainable and ethical fashion. And when I go travel, I can carry both of those things over to my trips. I can take the viewpoint that I have of people or of different cultures, because I think we're all made in the image of God. I can bring that into my travel, but I also can bring sustainability into it. How can you travel sustainably? You know, so
Mm,
you have these couple of different morals and values and kind of codes of conduct that we all individually have. And we can take those types of niches um, and like bring them into different types of content as well. So that's the joy of it, is I can kind of maneuver and change. But all that to say, I'm not quite sure what season 2 will be. I do miss podcasting, like doing this right now. This is so fun. It's been a
yeah.
minute. It's been like a month and a half. So I'm very
Yeah.
excited to be on a podcast again.
It is a lot of fun. That's why I keep doing it too. It's an excuse to BS with cool people like you. I mean, truly,
Thank you.
that's
Do
it's
you like interviewing?
yeah, I do because you learn for the same reason that you like to travel. I feel like you get to at least maybe hear a perspective that is outside of your own head, and maybe you never
Mm,
realize yourself before, which is interesting to me. Or you get to talk to somebody about something maybe you've never done before, and but you want to learn about it, and you can. You just it just communicate, just talk. And this is an
yeah,
excuse to like have those conversations with these dream people that I've always wanted to ask questions to. You know, after seeing
yeah.
what it is that they're doing, I'm like, how is it that they do that? Or what was it like for them? Or would I be able to do the same thing? What did it take for them to do X, Y, or Z? Just I've always been kind of a curious person. So I just yeah, for me it's a lot of fun. I love that you talked on fashion, and you're a mid-sized baddie too. Slow and sustainable is your vibe. It's mine too. I try as hard as it is. I try to be conscientious of that. What can you talk to me about the moment that you realized that you wanted to make slow and sustainable fashion a priority for you? Because we all have our different story with that.
So actually, that trip to India was the
Mm,
most eye-opening trip, not only in that, as I mentioned, culture is very different there than the United States. So everything I'd grown up with, very, very different from what I knew. But then also, I was in a fashion program. My major is fashion merchandising, and my minor is a very long term. It's integrated marketing, communication, and design. And it's just a fancy way of saying traditional social media marketing together, very minimal graphic design experience. Don't ask
yeah.
me to do your branding.
Yeah.
And
Oh.
I went to the 2 week trip for India to go and view what the fashion industry was like there at that time. And
Mm,
at that moment in time, and this could definitely have changed, Rahul Mishra was the designer and he was up and coming. And he was really one of the only people who was employing local craftsmen and creators to continue doing traditional like weaving and
mm,
like creating clothing and patterns and stitching and things like that. And so I already had a little bit of background on like how is clothing made, but then when you walk through a factory and you're seeing someone do it well, and you're
mm,
kind of understanding also the difference of lifestyle and class, because they have a very different class system there. So walking through an environment and understanding that that was one of the more positive environments, you know, that's
mhm,
a safe building, that's a clean building, that's a modern factory, and understanding that people go into work where it's even like worse than that situation, because his factory was beautiful, but it's very simple. So
mhm,
understanding that people go into places that are no longer safe buildings, they work 18-hour days, they
yeah,
don't get paid more than 6 cents a garment on average, they don't get bathroom breaks, they don't get lunch, they don't have any benefits. Like understanding that, to me, put it more in my face, and it was no longer just a concept, it was a reality sitting in front of me. And so that's something that I'm very passionate about because I had no idea about it till I went and
Yeah.
saw it. And since I can't bring everybody with me to India for them to see it, it's how can I educate people like you were asking earlier? How do I make it, digestible for the average American? And for many of us who are in our age range, we've never had to question where our clothes come from. We just show up to a store and they're there. But to
Mm.
understand that in other parts of the world, people are being taken advantage of, and to also just have like decency of a human life and a quality of life. And I mean, I've had conversations with people where they've said, well, it's better than prostitution. And that's like a real conversation I've had
Oh
that
my God.
it's, I know it's very gross to me because I think it was bothersome too because like the two conversations I'm thinking of that had that vibe were both with men. And I
Of
think like,
course.
what if it was first of all you, but secondly, what if it was, your sister, your mom? We have that
Yeah.
conversation around other topics as well for women, but it's a predominantly women run industry. They're in a vulnerable position, they're being taken advantage of. And if your only other option is to sell yourself, that's not really a good option in my viewpoint. That's not what I
No.
want to support. And so part of that education is going little bit by little bit because I found when I try and educate people on the whole system, I'm very passionate about it. So I'll talk about it and all the different aspects of it. But I think people get overwhelmed. And so it's just chipping away at like, hey, just because something is cheaper doesn't mean that that's good. We've associated cheap with good for so long, but it's
Mhm.
not only the human aspect of it, it's the environmental impact as well. And the average American, I want to say someone told me the average American buys 64 pieces of clothing every year, wears it an average of 7 times and throws it out.
Wha
So that's like,
7? Only
yeah,
7. Good Lord. Okay,
yes.
so, I mean, just talking about sustainability, like, this is something that I'm personally working on. I'm not the
Yeah,
best at
tell me
finding,
about
like
that.
well, I'm not the best at finding, like, sustainable brands, but to be more sustainable, I'm working on consuming less,
There you
and
go. That's
where
totally good.
it's a start. I mean, I'm
It
trying. I'm
is.
working on consuming less and really like wearing what I already have multiple ways and getting statement pieces versus the hot trend that's in that
Yes.
season. And a year from now, we won't see it. That's not what I put in my closet anymore. Like I'm actively thinking about this and changing this. Whew, but it seems like it's this impossible task, but it's really not. I mean, you can make little changes like that if you want to at least get started or
Yes.
get in the right mindset of thinking, you're right. I don't want to put this person in Bangladesh or whatever that's making my clothes
Mhm.
for 2 cents on the dollar. I don't want to put them through that. And
Yeah.
one of the ways that I can stop that is by consuming less and their efforts aren't maybe needed as much or maybe for whatever reason. I guess I'm not enough of a business person to explain it, but maybe they won't have to have that task on their desk and have that
Yes.
added to their plate. It's hard not to consume because we're still a capitalist country and we don't
Yep.
have what we have without consuming something. And that's why I think people want to hold on to whatever it is that they have because they're afraid it'll go away. Because here you work for what you have and then you hold on to it like
Yep.
tooth and nail because it could go
Yes.
away at any time. And you are aware of that. But I think that's why people prefer things to do on the cheap end, but they don't understand that there's consequences to doing it that way as well. And
Yes.
it's just putting thought into it. Just putting thought into it is a good start too.
And I would wholeheartedly agree. Any point of conviction and a desire to change is a great start. So that's something I always tell people when I first started this journey. I came back from India and I was so like I was excited, but I think I started annoying people because I was like, we can't consume anymore. Like all these people, we got to change the whole system. That's not realistic. It's taken a few years, but I've started to, again, for myself, for other people, do it more digestibly. But I think something that is incorrect in thinking I hear a lot is that people won't have jobs if we don't buy clothes. And I just want to
Mm.
touch on that real quick because the idea is not that these people get their jobs taken away and they don't have any options. The point is to hold brands accountable so that the people who are already employed are being paid a livable wage. They have benefits. A lot of these women, their children aren't being educated because they can't afford it. So they sit in the factories with them. Like these are all
Oh,
things to consider, like family life, quality of life. That's more what I'm discussing. It's not about changing the entire system. It's just about demanding accountability for brands. And that's something that's interesting to me because when it comes to a small business or a local business, we connect with them because of what they believe in and what they stand for. But then we go to our fast fashion, big box store retailers, and we don't have that same mindset. And also to keep in mind, like retailers like that, like the big box stores, the fast fashion companies, that's only 150, 200 years old. That's a very new concept within the realm of clothing.
mm. Yeah, it is. I
And
hope we see
so
more.
yes, I hope that we see a lot of changes and people just, you know, there's sources for education that are really simple and kind of the beginning steps. While I'm here in Amsterdam, I went to the Fashion for Good Museum, which is all about how Amsterdam is changing the whole discussion on clothing and the environment and the fashion industry. And that was, I mean, they're light years ahead of the United States. So I hope to see the United States
Yes.
catch up.
That's a huge thing with travel too. Like just even going to museums and seeing how one country frames an event or a topic versus
Yes.
another one. Like you learn so much at that museum that you just mentioned. I would love to see it for the record. And when I was
It'll
in
be in the vlog.
yeah, okay. Well, I'm looking forward to it. I mean,
Thank you.
Minnesota isn't that far from Winnipeg in Canada.
Mhm.
So I did the 8.5 hour drive there when I got a passport because I was just so excited that I got a passport and I wanted to use it. And
Yeah.
but in Winnipeg, there is the Canadian Human Rights Museum. And it's so interesting because when you go there, you learn that they framed 9/11 and the response to it as a form of genocide, which blew my mind.
Really?
Blew my mind that Canadians were looking at how Americans treated Iraqis and Afghanis as
Mm.
terrible. Like it was on par with other genocides in that timeline. It was like a literal timeline that they outlined. And I was like, oh, it's like you would never, nobody would have the balls to put that in an American museum, but it's not,
Yeah. Yes.
in some aspects, yeah, it kind of was. It was an unfair targeting of a specific group of people when it was only a select few actually involved.
Yes.
It was
Absolutely. And
odd.
it's so weird. I mean, I was 6 when that happened, so it's weird looking back. If there's one thing I've learned being a younger millennial, it's that we've had so many different events happen that are like unprecedented in our history and in our time of us being alive. And it is so interesting how quickly people jump on a conclusion. And so I think what I've learned through all those experiences is to take it slow and to just wait and listen and see what happens.
Yeah, best policy for anything. That's how you learn. So
Yes.
what's next for you when it comes to travel, social media, fashion, any of it? What's next for you? What are you looking forward to?
So I will be coming back to Minnesota and I will be doing an internship for social media, just both to update my resume, but also to get more graphic design experience because I know that that's really hot on the market right now. But then beyond that, I will be traveling nationally within the United States throughout the summer. So I'm going to be focusing more on Airbnbs and more vacation destination in that sense. And then my hope for the fall for travel would be more international again and more longer term because this is a 2.5 week trip to Amsterdam. And so I do want to learn. There's a concept I talked about in my podcast about slow travel and really
Mm.
taking those ideas about slow fashion and like the mindfulness and putting it into travel and how we can environmentally, have better environmental impact and things of that sort. And also just to really benefit the local economy of the places you're visiting, not just a quick in and out. And I'm just looking forward to where the podcast will go. I think it can only go up from here. And with all the content I'm creating, every single time I post a YouTube vlog, every single time I do a podcast episode, I learn something new. And so it's very exciting. And I think that's the joy of it is people look back on stuff they created a year ago and they're embarrassed. And I don't think they should be because
Yeah.
everything we create is like new and exciting and fun. And you learn something through every experience.
Yeah. Well, Kaylee, I have had a wonderful time with you. Thank you so much for everything you shared. I can't wait to see it all.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm so honored. It was very fun to be back on a podcast.
Woo woo!